The cacophony outside might make my voice seem very dim. I want to talk about how can you harness your emotions to lead. The first thing that comes to my mind is that human beings, leaders are human beings. They're not robots. But sometimes we're in environments where emotion and leadership are considered as separate as oil and water, right? What does this lead to? This leads to leaders trying to suppress their emotions, at least the negative ones. Yeah? And I'm very glad that earlier on the speaker talked about the fact that yes, there is a part of her that's stubborn. There's a part of her that feels anger, because that's a part of everybody. And I think we're coming to that point societally in terms of organizations where people are talking about authentic leadership, where people are finally talking about the fact that there is emotion and maybe it's not that bad to talk about it. When I thought about this topic, the first person that flashed in my mind was Jacinda Ardern, right? How she has taken the whole, the very, very horrible terrorist attack and handled it is beautiful. But I'm not going to talk about her because the whole world is talking about her. So what I'm going to talk about is, what do I think you need to do to harness emotions to lead? There are a couple of things I think is very essential. The first and foremost is to recognize the emotion in the moment. And yes, I do think mindfulness is a very, very good strategy for that. In the moment, can you recognize the emotion you're feeling? The second thing, the second step, is can you name the emotion? So sometimes we know that we're feeling something, but we cannot put a name to it. So can you put a name to the emotion you're feeling? The third thing is, can you create a pause? That one moment where you can say, okay, this is what I want to talk about. This is how I want to respond versus react. I think if you can do these three things and then respond, you will be able to harness your emotions. Similarly, as a leader, you need to be able to see all of these in other people. That means in the moment, you have to be able to recognize somebody else's emotion. In the moment, you have to be able to put a name to it. And in the moment, you need to understand how should you act so that person responds instead of reacts. While I was thinking of this, a couple of my coaching clients came to mind, and I'm going to share some of them. Maybe it rings a bell. And I'm using this example because it's very current. Hardly 2 weeks ago. I'll give you the situation so you understand where we're coming from. Very large company, multinational company. Actually, two very large companies, multinational companies, are merging together. One is getting acquired by the other. And as the India head, this gentleman has to give a speech to all the employees, right? It is a very critical moment because on this, the vibe for the next 20, 30, 100 years is going. So it's high stress. There's a global mandate to get the speech right. They're putting in a lot of effort. So that's where I step in. And when I step in, I find that we have this leader who is an expat. So he's from France. And he's struggling with the fact that, there's this speech, there's obviously this massive cultural upheaval that's going on. How does he react to that? So the first thing we said is, okay, what do you want? At the end of your speech, what do you want? What do you want in terms of people, what should they do and what should they feel? And there I think he was being very authentic. So he says, the first thing I want them is that they should know who I am. They should know me, not my credentials, not the fact that I've been, with this organization for 30 years, I've worked across the globe. Those are credentials. The other thing that was very, very glaring is the fact that obviously he was not Indian. And the whole team that he was going to lead in India were Indian. So we thought about how do we make him more human. Even the name is very difficult to pronounce. So the point that I'm trying to make is that he was aware of it. He was aware that because of his different nationality, it may be a barrier. And he was aware and he was willing to look at options. So the option there was that we said, okay, so you have seen a lot of India? He says, yes, I have. I said, would you be open to being vulnerable and putting up pictures of you and your family in India? This is fantastic. Right? He also thought of using that concept of unity in diversity to describe the fact that there are two companies coming together. Now, it was a very unique situation in India specifically because the company that was acquiring were 500 people. And the company that was getting acquired was 1,000 people. Right? So there are sensitivities on both sides. What was very important for me to understand was that he was aware of that. He had thought through things as minute as what would people feel when they come in one day and they see a different facade. What would people feel when they look at their intranet and it looks different? And what would people feel who would all of a sudden not feel at home because there are 1,000 more people and they no longer have all familiar faces? The point that I'm trying to make, and there were many such things that he focused on, all of them were very authentic to him. The only role I played, if any, was to draw it out from him. It brought back to my mind this very, very important thing, which is that as a leader, you have to be very cognizant of emotion, not only yours, but that of others. And you need to learn how to respond to that. Another very key thing that I have noticed, we always, when we talk about layoffs, we talk about how it impacts people who get laid off. Just the other day, I was talking to somebody about the fact that I was going to do this talk, and if there was anything she would want to share. And she said, in 2008, we had a downturn. India, it was really bad. I don't know how it was outside.
Globally bad.
Globally bad. And so she was in the position where she had to ask a couple of her teammates to leave. She talks about the fact that as a leader, she understood that there was no option. It was a business imperative, but she was human. She says, after I communicated that news, I nearly fainted. And she had to be rushed to the hospital. How many times are we even willing to consider the impact of these difficult decisions? What is the impact that these difficult decisions have on the leader themselves? Nowhere in all the news did we talk about how is it impacting the leaders when they have to go out and tell their people. I remember in another coaching session, there was somebody who was very distressed. And his distress was around the fact that he knew that one full business unit was going to be shut down because they've lost the client. But he can't communicate that yet because it's not a mandate. He knows all those people who will get the sack. And a few of them had even got their new cars and new houses recently. He was totally distressed about how is he going to communicate that. The key here is, are we talking about these things? Are we harnessing our emotions? Are we able to understand that as leaders we have emotion? And as leaders, we need not pretend that we do not have the emotion. What we need to do is to harness it, to be able to use it. And if we can generate the emotion that we want for ourselves as well as for others, I think we're successes. And with that, I'll hand you over to Raghav.
Thank you very much for that. I thought we had a moderator. I don't quite know what's happened. But as you guys can tell, I'm not from India. I'm India origin, but I live in London. And it's really great to be back here, in fact, because, speaking to my other half, Effie, who I came to the forum with, who's actually one of the speakers that was invited in, she told me about it, and I thought it was such a fantastic platform, bringing women together for such a phenomenal opportunity to raise the voice for such important areas that need to be addressed greater in today's society. And then this topic that I was kind of given by the forum. So I put my name down for a couple of others. You'll hear me speak throughout this week coming up. But one of them was harnessing the power of emotions to lead. And for me, this is a super interesting topic because given that a lot of the work that I do, my passion is, if I'm working with somebody, my passion is how can I help them get the best out of themselves, more out of themselves than they get by themselves. So it's funny, I have this joke, and sadly it's a true story, that when I used to tell my family quite a while back, being a coach in the Indian environment is becoming so much more popular. I love hearing other Indian coaches about their story in the journey, but when I started out in London, now being a coach isn't typically the coolest thing to do from an Indian background. So I remember when my mum heard I was a life coach back then, she thought that was a lifeguard. I had a couple of relatives that they thought I was sitting on a beach. So when they hear I'm here in India, I don't think they realize I'm standing behind a podium. In fact, more sitting on one of the nice beaches that India has. One of the gifts, many gifts to the country. But when I think about harnessing the power of emotions to lead, I really love the words that Lovely shared, because they were fantastic. And for me, when I think about harnessing emotions to lead, it reminds me of something super important, that leadership is about the internal journey. It starts by the internal journey. It's the inner work that we do on ourselves as leaders. It's no longer about direction or management, because we all know the how-tos. Very often, any book you read is full of the how-tos. If you want a strategy for something, you can probably just ask Siri on your iPhone, you might want to ask it, how do you scale your company from 100 to 500 million? It's good for ordering pizza though. But in terms of actually harnessing the power of your emotions, through what I've done, I believe that emotion is a beautiful thing. It's a vital thing. Lovely hit the nail on the head when she spoke about companies today need to address emotions to a much more greater depth than we currently do. Mental health, the issues around mental health are rising. People are reporting more, say, issues of stress, times of challenge, times of anxiety. So I think recognizing emotion is key. Very recently I wrote a report for Yahoo Finance, and they asked me, Rob, can you give us a comment, how can we handle stress? What are the best ways? And one of them is to approach somebody you're working with, to approach your colleagues, to approach your hiring managers about what you're experiencing. The challenge is every person on that thread said, Raghav, I've tried, but they've just told me I better find another job, I've just got to adjust. So emotional work isn't given the respect and the gratitude and the appreciation it needs to. But when we talk about leadership and what leadership really represents, emotions to me is like the gear in a car. It's important, but it's not the ultimate driver for performance. It's not the ultimate thing that transforms a vehicle from what it is to a race car, or something that really gets the best out of itself. Because when I think about leadership, we're all leaders in a number of different ways. If you're a parent, I'm sure a number of you are parents, congratulations to you. That is a form of leadership, leading your kids powerfully. If you are a teacher, you're leading the students powerfully. If you are a speaker, you're leading the audience powerfully. We are all leaders in one way or form. It goes so much more beyond the title, and it's not just about a corporate feel. Leadership is about how do we choose to live our life. Now for me, one of the key ingredients for leadership is tuning into wisdom, is operating your life in wisdom. Because when I think about emotions for me aren't the most effective way to make decisions. If you look at a lot of the decisions today that are made across the world, or if you're from London like me, that are made, like Brexit, that go on for years and years and years, then it's the emotion that very often gets in the way. But when we think about what emotion represents, is energy in motion. Very often emotion in a working environment includes stress, includes anxiety, and it's a survival mechanism based on a fear that we have or a threat that we think is in our external environment. When we respond to threats, when we respond to something that's not real, or if we try and harness something that isn't real, what we're doing is playing with something that's not real. It's just not sustainable. That whenever you're feeling the stress and anxiety or anything that you're going through that maybe gets in the way of leadership, the very thing for me that cuts through that is actually being aware of your emotions and recognizing it's so beautiful to feel human. You know, if I talk about wisdom, I heard something really profound the other day from one of my mentors. He was coaching a CEO, and the CEO sat down, and for 20 minutes, he was just talking about how he had such a horrible week. He was talking about this didn't go according to plan, and that didn't happen. And you know, my coffee's never arrived in time, and it was like a latte, not an Americano. And I don't know if I'm making that up. I think he complained about that a little bit. And then there's a lot of things about the company that didn't go according to plan. And right at the end of it, the coach just said, "So I'm guessing you've had a bad week then," to describe that. And the CEO broke into laughter because we think it's so bad to have bad days. We think it's a problem to have bad weeks. And for me, the way I describe that is welcome to the human experience. Because as a performance coach, I really wish I didn't have bad days, but sadly I do. Well, not sadly, it's beautiful. Because it reminds me of the gift that it is to be human. And the more we recognize that, I don't think it's 1 in 4 that go through mental health challenges. I think it's 4 in 4. I think every single person needs to have a conversation about mental health. And realize it's not a problem, it's just the beauty of the human experience. Back in the day, and I love Greek mythology, and back in the day when the gods walked the planet, the citizens and the civilians of who lived in Greece and under Mount Olympus thought that when there was thunder and lightning, it was Zeus being angry at them. Then they'd start reacting towards that. But that's just the nature of the weather. Nowadays, we don't have that reaction when there's thunder and lightning, because this is the human experience that we have through our emotions. But leadership comes when we can recognize our emotion, we can recognize the experience, but we allow ourselves to come through wisdom. We allow ourselves to slow down our thinking, because we live in a thinking-created world. Our thinking, most of the time when we're having an emotional response, isn't real. I mean, going further, we're not even in control of the emotional response. We're not even in control of our thinking. Like in the past, I used to work with my clients a lot of mindset, but one of the challenges I realized is that we're not necessarily in control of our thinking, because what it does from time to time is it changes. But the gift lies when we allow our thinking to really slow and come from a grounded place, to actually listen to wisdom, listen to intuition, listen to, I call it a deeper intelligence. If we look at any scenario today, whether even political, one of the things I wish that a lot of governments did more is just to listen, like slow down, get your thinking out of the way, get your emotions, just recognize this emotion, truly listen to each other and take the time to listen, because when you slow down, you have amazing wisdom come through that guides you. You can call it the deeper intelligence, you can call it God. In Hindi we call it Bhagwan. You can call it anything that you like, whether you're religious, whether you're not. There's something more intelligent that exists within all of us, which drives us today. If you want an idea, check this out. You guys are still listening to this talk. There's no effort involved to live. There's no effort involved to put blood around your body. There's no effort involved by you to breathe. There's something really incredible about the human nature that takes care of most of the heavy lifting. It's that same force where we get our wisdom from. A great way to look at this is think about the last time you had a really inspired idea, something that just struck you. Where do you get your best ideas from? I asked this to one of my clients who's recently set up a gelato store in London, where I love him even more for that now. He set up an ice cream store in London. And I asked him, where did you get the idea from? And he said, Raghav, I got the idea from when I wasn't actually in the kitchen. I got it from when I was watching a TV show. All the best ideas come when we slow down and when we allow our thinking just to subside and look for what we know as wisdom. Look for what we know is true. Look for what we know is the way forward. Because whether we get caught up in emotions or not, there's a deeper intelligence that's driving us. And that if we give it enough time and enough attention and listen to it, it's the very place where the most effective things have come from. This is how we live our life, almost on autopilot. There's so little thinking involved. We take action. One of my clients, often the question I get is if we ignore emotion, if we ignore all the thinking, like how am I going to take action? How am I going to do stuff? Well, last time I checked, when we slow down, when we start thinking down, we don't just stop living our life. It just occurs to us about what is the clearest way forward to go and create something, to go and achieve something, to go and have a magical impact in the world. Let's look at what J.K. Rowling achieved. She was a visionary. She was an incredible artist. Let's look at what Picasso achieved. Let's look at what Da Vinci achieved. Every single one of these people was living through wisdom, so much creativity that allowed them to create such masterpieces for the world. That didn't come through stress. That didn't come from trying too hard. That didn't come through overexertion. What that came through was wisdom. That came through intelligence. That came through their own art, their creativity, their passion. By slowing down and allowing ideas to fill them up. It's the very same force through which we live our life, in every single way, shape, and form. So when we talk about harnessing the power of emotions to lead, emotions really are the gift. But it's just, like I say, the gearbox in your car. But when we go beyond emotion to actually looking at something that lies a lot beyond our thinking, which is that in some way or form, there's always the right answer for us in any way or form, whether it's growing a company, whether it's even being a great role model. These things happen as a byproduct just by allowing yourself just to have a little more mindfulness, a little bit more calmness. I heard this incredible lady, she was speaking before, and she spoke about mindfulness. She touched on the power of presence. If you notice today, everyone's talking about mindfulness. Everyone is talking about meditation. What does meditation do? Just allow your thinking to slow down. What does mindfulness do? Just allow your thinking to slow down. Because when you're not thinking, you're not having an emotional experience. Simple as that. Any emotion is just a response to what are you thinking about. And when you're not thinking, you're actually just slowing down, letting go of control, because we're not in control. There's very little we have control over. You've got more chance of controlling the weather than you do your emotions, right? We have such little control over anything. So when we give that up, we then allow ourselves to humbly tune into something a little bit more greater, where every single extraordinary decision is made from. And in fact, we don't even call it a decision. I was coaching a client on this, and he said, Raghav, if I don't overthink, so I'm so stressed out, I'm really stressed out about this, I'm trying to control this, you're telling me I need to let go. Well, the question I ask is, well, how's it working out for you so far if you try harder? If you're stressed, how does that work out if you try and control things a little bit more? I love how our thinking works. We think when we get so stressed down, we've got these big areas of our life we want to lead. We need to try harder, we need to try and control things more. And we get so stressed out that I'm not going to pay the bills, I'm not going to do this. So if I worry about it more, somehow things are going to work out. And we worry about it a bit more. And then it never occurs to us to slow down. And what you'll find is that when we're in that place of peace, we experience the highest performance. Like whatever you need for any area of life, when you allow yourself to just show up beyond your thinking, you experience incredible clarity. You experience the way forward. It just somehow works out. Like I use a sports example. Now when I'm in London, I ask this question a lot, and there's quite a lot of no's. So I'm hoping there's going to be a big yes in this room. Are you guys familiar with Virat Kohli? Everyone know Virat Kohli? Yeah, brilliant. Fantastic. In London, they're like, who? I'm like, no way, get out of my seminar. I don't say that to my audience. I'm a bit politer than that. But when you look at the greatest athletes, the greatest artists performing, do they look stressed out and worked up? Or do they look balanced, grounded, at peace, in harmony, relaxed, in the zone of flow? You see, it's not a flow that they're creating, it's what they're tuning into. They're tuning into something that's all around them, and they allow their mind to just quiet. And you look at the batsman who's facing the bowler. You look at one of your favorite chefs. They don't mechanically think about the process. They allow the process to happen. If you give, for example, one of my favorite chefs, Gordon Ramsay, any piece of food, he will just sort it out within moments. He doesn't have to think about it. There's no emotions involved. There's no thinking involved. It's just what happens when we allow ourselves to experience our life in a slightly different way. So what my invitation to is for all of you listening here today, that if you run a business, if you're an amazing parent and you want to be an extraordinary parent, or whatever the direction is that you wish to lead, just ask yourself if there's any reason you won't have that, whatever direction you want to move in. If you just allow yourself just to experience the best of it in the present, why would you not go and lead in the direction you want to go? There's very rarely anything that gets in the way. And the more we allow ourselves to slow down, the more clarity that you have. So for me, emotions are a gift. Acknowledge them, recognize them. But then your answer comes not from when we're trying to control and influence with our emotions, but when we allow ourselves to recognize that intuition, insight, clarity, wisdom, direction. These are gifts we have an abundance of. And when we tune into, the byproduct is more money in the business, better relationships, better confidence, better happiness. Because when you ask anybody, and anybody I coach, if you ask anybody, why do you do what you do? Why do you, for example, want to lead? I want to lead so I can grow the business. Yeah, why do you want to do that? What does that give you? Well, that makes me happier. Well, don't you have happiness when we slow down? You see, because when we do, we have that already, yet we're looking outside for all the things we already have within us to perform better. Now, I'm not saying take your foot off the gas and don't perform. I'm just saying that when you allow yourself to show up properly, performance is just a cherry on top of the sprinkles. Why wouldn't you perform? But the greater gift is that you actually enjoy what you're doing even better. How many times I've seen people that come to me that once were passionate, so passionate about what they started. They have this masterpiece in their mind of the company they want to grow, of the drawing they want to paint, or whatever direction they want to go in, or the gelato store they want to create. The damage comes when we actually forget about why we started. We lose the passion just because we're trying to control everything to such a great level. That creates more stress, more burnout. Instead, the happiness and the flow and the passion, all of it comes just from that sense of wisdom. So where's the wisdom? It's all around you. Tune into it. Enjoy, and I hope to catch up with all of you throughout the rest of the week. Thank you for listening.